welcome back to the soon-to-be named city. We're starting off by fixing an issue of plumbing and sewage that's going on over in the farming industry area. So while past me's working on that, the voiceover version is going to talk a little bit about the future of this channel very briefly. While editing this video and previewing the next few that I have stocked up, I realized that my recording style is still pretty choppy in certain places, and that's something that I really want to work on. I do have about 8 hours remaining of gameplay from this particular city, and it is saved, so I can come back and make edits or improvements from what I've learned after trying a different style of filming. I want to see if recording my voiceover well in-game is something that's easier to work with, or if doing the voiceover in post, like I'm doing right now, works better for me. For this particular area, I'm focusing on developing a tiered space to allow for the sewage outlet and any treatment tanks to have a home that's separate from the apartment complexes. So that's my focus while I'm working on this area. Last episode, I spent a bunch of development points and got various service buildings, including the water treatment plant. I wanted to place this over in the industrial hub that I have going on, and after placing it, I worked on developing the roadway network just a little bit further. You're going to get a really brief view of my budget and what I was playing with. You probably saw it stream by there really fast. But I obviously need to have more Sims, so that way I have more income with taxes, so on and so forth. So I'm going to shift over to the opposite side of our main entry road into the city and start by terraforming. Now right here is where I get distracted. The castle by the train tracks is one of those spaces that I would like to turn into a unique community area. This is something I like to do with the castle ruins, the cemetery, and the farmhouse that are kind of strategically placed around the map by the developers or by the map creator. Now, as I'm doing all of this terraforming, one thing that I'm keeping in mind is that I want this to be a community space. I want it to be a landmark, something that people will drive by, something that people will be interested in coming to. So in order to encourage that, I am developing a little bridge in this particular area. You can see the terraforming is really taking effect. I'm tapering the hill a little bit, and in this process I forget to turn sloping on. But I'm wanting to create a way for people to enjoy the train tracks and potentially in the future have a little viewing space for people who enjoy trains and want to watch them go from point A to point B. After doing this particular bridge, or at least inserting it, I'm using Move It to lower it down, leaving the game on kind of a medium speed so that way I can watch as trains come by and test to see how tall I actually want this bridge to be compared to the train line, the train itself, so on and so forth. Terraforming once again to make things a little bit nicer before starting to navigate back towards the residential area. I'm doing quite a bit more terraforming and working with the roadway for this future residential region. Before I start placing things, I also want to look at the needs that my Sims have, so that way I can start placing some of those necessities, areas of concern, before placing down housing. So to start, we're looking specifically at our budgeting, what are things that we have a surplus of or not enough of, and then we go back to our needs. Obviously, I'm needing a little bit of electricity, so I'm making a plan for how I could make money off of that, but I also need elementary schools and high schools. So I'm going through finding the particular asset that I'm wanting before placing it in a rough location. A lot of the times when I'm placing things like schools, police, welfare offices, prisons, all of those different surface buildings, I find myself placing them right on a main road rather than just off of it. And that does tend to create backups in traffic. So a lot of what I've started doing is placing them and then using Move It to adjust them later on as I start to develop the downtown or a main part of a city. As I'm getting into the actual main road structure of this residential or small section of town, it's starting to become apparent to me that there's going to be some issues, specifically with the landscaping. That little triangular situation that I created up here is gonna be hard to work with, but for the time being, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It's just a connection from point A to point B. So I'm getting a couple of two-way roads placed in and trying to make it as smooth of a transition as possible, which is obviously a little bit hard for me. With all this terraforming, I'm wanting to create little pockets of greenway or green spaces that residents can drive by and experience on their own as they move through the city. From here, I've sped up the time lapse a little bit so you can see how I'm playing around with the different service buildings. So I've moved the elementary school, I have a couple of roads that are bisecting, and kind of creating thoroughfares to the other main entrances to this part of town. But once again, I've sped this area up so that way you can kind of experience the process as it goes. After placing in my prison, I started working on different roadway areas to make an offshoot or a peninsula that's focused on improving the lives of citizens that have gone to prison. So, kind of like rehabilitation situation. And while I'm doing this, I notice that there's a big backup happening that looks like it's mostly parked cars. So I go through, add trees to the sides of some of these roads, and I start noticing okay, the main drag into the city is also having these issues. So let's get into updating some of those roadway networks and figuring out what exactly the problem is. Right about here is where I start to realize that it's not just traffic, it's also pedestrians that are causing some of the traffic issues. So I'm placing in some over the road networks for pedestrians to start utilizing, and it's an issue that I found is consistent as I am building. I typically leave pedestrian pathways for the very, very end. This is another reason why I'd like to start a new city so that way I can focus on creating roadway and pedestrian networks that are substantial and actually thought of in the early stages rather than having to maneuver things later on. You can also see I get a little distracted by doing detailing here. That's something that's gonna happen quite often in this video, or at least in this particular series. I blame my brain for wanting to have functionality but also have something that's aesthetically pleasing. So you can see I'm kind of running around and playing a little bit from time to time with things that are not on task, if you wish to put it that way. Now, I don't actually place in this well for office. I'm mainly looking to see can it fit into this zone. But once again, I get distracted and I start to develop a secondary roadway network that would take me to a small town. Another access point for the highway to get to all of these different areas. Another way to get to kind of that forestry section that's off to the other side of that cliff. While I'm working through this space, I really like the way that the two lakes are interacting or close to each other. So before getting too crazy, I end up creating a pathway for them to connect to one another. I think it'd be really interesting to play around with waterfalls. It's something that I'm always interested in. And by playing around with the train tracks, playing around a little bit with the water features, maybe it's something I can improve, and maybe in the future I could turn this area into a small dam of sorts. I'm doing a little bit of a fix up for the lines that are connecting to these windmills, trying to make sure that power is actually going to be getting back to the city. By developing this very rough representation of a potential waterfall in the future or a potential dam, my landscaping is obviously pretty rough. So I play around a little bit with refining this area, softening things up, and making it visually a little bit more interesting for if there was an actual dam in this space. So thinking about, does the land need to actually be this high? Can we play around with different aspects of things? Now this is where I start to really get into the services. I always love using the solar power just mainly because it can create some really great green energy. But I also know that the geothermal, after watching other creators' videos, the geothermal is actually a better way to go if you're working with monetary income and you're trying to increase the money coming into your city. Now here I'm mainly just playing around with the contours that I have adjusted, as well as how people are going to be accessing different parts of this facility. Some of it is highly functional, some of it within either this video or within the next, you'll see that I made some very grave mistakes and have to go back and do some very substantial editing. We're going to be finishing up this episode with the finalization of the railway network that goes to the train station, as well as the roadways that will navigate Sims to this location or destination as well. Thank you for joining me during this video, and if you've made it to the end, I'm glad you've stayed for the whole time, or at least you skipped through to see the end. If you've got questions or comments, don't hesitate to leave them below. But ta-ta for now, and have a great day.